Hi, everyone. Welcome to Advancing Education, How Human Performance Technology and Educational Technology Can Advance the Learner-Centered Paradigm. My name is Alex Wanstrath. I'm an Instructional Design and Technology PhD candidate at Liberty University, currently taking EDUC 732, Human Performance Technology. The bit.ly link for my presentation today is bit.ly/732HPT for Human Performance Technology. So at the beginning of a presentation in conference style, I would have this up, allow participants to go ahead and join, allow them to go through the Google Slides as we went through these together. So here's my title slide, Advancing Education. Today, what we're going to be taking a look at is human performance technology and how that, coupled with educational technology, will help advance the online environment for education. So a couple of references and contact information. The slide template that I'm using today is called Digital Nomad. It's the slides from a place called Slides Go. The graphics that are used are all illustrated by Free Pick Storyset. That's storyset.com/search to find some of these items. Each one of them is individually named and given attribution for Storyset. References are listed at the very end of these slides in APA format for the last one. Contact information down there below, my name, plus awanstrath@liberty.edu. All right, so the couple of things that we're going to be taking a look at here today. We're first going to be taking a look at the problem, the setup. Why are we taking a look at HPT and educational technology? How do they play a part into each other? And how can they start to help education? But first, we have to look at why it is that we're even having this discussion. So HPT, human performance technology, is going to take a look at the problem. We're going to start with that as part of that framework and part of that following influence. We're also going to see human performance technology and educational technology. We're going to lay some groundwork for both of those so that we have a baseline and foundation for jargon. Then we're going to move into a couple of big topics. The first one being problem analysis. How does this help? What can HPT do for education? The second one, for number 4, is going to be adapting the environment. How do we start to figure out how can we manipulate the environment and what needs to change to better suit the learner in education? We're then going to be taking a look at the interaction between practitioners and research, how that plays a factor into education, especially benefiting the learner. Then last, we'll have a conclusion and a wrap up at the very end here. All right, so first, let's go ahead and take a look at the problem. The big question, and the question that's been asked for a very long time, is how do we best educate students? And this has been going around for quite a long time in the United States, but there's been a lot of different theories. Whether we're taking a look at guys like Horace Mann, whether we're taking a look at guys like Dewey, Gutek in 2011 was saying there's rationalism, there's behaviorism, and the idea of knowledge transference was really key to those industrialists and some of the technology that they first laid out when we started our educational system here in the United States. That idea of knowledge transference, that idea of standardization was the same ideas that we got from the Industrial Revolution. How do we continue to standardize production for the United States to continue to boom economically, but also how do we standardize education for those kids who are going to become part of that industrial factory as we know it? What we're also going to see is the question of, all right, so how do we do this now that we're moved past the industrial system? We're now to the information age, and how do we get there in the 21st century? There's instructional design considerations, using that instructional design such as ADDIE or some of the front-end analysis such as Harless's ideas in human performance technology. What's going to work best? How do we have these classrooms with seats in rows, different time slots for different places? How do we best educate kids across the board? But more importantly, what are the restrictions to this? How are educators restricted? How are learners restricted? How are school districts restricted? And what are some ways that we can get around those things? The big thing is what drives the actual classroom today. Whereas education was in a certain spot 20, 30, 40 years ago because of technological restrictions, we're now seeing that as we enter a digital environment that's more expansive than ever before, what are some of those things that we didn't think about before in education due to restrictions that we can start to overcome now? What we're going to see is a basic principle here with how do we best educate students. We have our analysis, we add in our design, and then we get an improvement of performance in some way, form, or fashion. That formula has worked, but can that formula be improved if we improve the analysis? Can that formula be improved if we improve design? Can that formula be improved if we think about performance in a different way? So we're not changing the formula necessarily, but we are changing what are the different parts and how can we make things better for the learner. So this is where human performance technology and educational technology come into practice. We have our human performance technology practitioners, those people that are looking at the problem, analyzing the problem. We also have educational technologists who are applying what we see as a problem into a solution. So between the practitioners who are analyzing, between what we have with the EdTech applicants, we have a design learning solution to optimize student learning. So we have a formula, but how can we make it even better? Well, we need this collaborative space. We need HPT, we need educational technologists. So let's take a look at HPT first. What is it? How can we define it? Well, HPT has an issue because there's a lot of different ways that HPT has been defined. However, Fauché in 2015 said, HPT is a systematic and principled practice for improving the productivity of organizations and individuals through coordinated interventions that show measured results. So what does that mean? The idea of HPT is to improve based on some kind of value and some measurement that says, this is the performance problem, let's tailor a package solution for it, and then let's see that improvement after the intervention and continue into that cycle. The whole idea of HPT is to figure out what is the real and actual issue. Don't just give a solutions package just because that was packaged. Don't just buy something from a company just because it's there. What is the problem? So we're not looking at what are people doing over there. We're not looking at the other group of people. We're not looking at people all across the globe. We're looking at this clientele, this demographic, these groups of learners. What can we do and how can we analyze for those specific people? So we're going to keep that in mind as we move forward here. As we move on to educational technology, the AECT defined it as the study and ethical practice of facilitating learning and improving performance by creating, using, and managing appropriate technological processes and resources. So as we take a look at EdTech, we're going to continue to have this fostering of creation, using, and management, all these different technological processes, whether they're actual digital tools or whether it's some kind of system that's created. So what we have here is a meshing between the analysis system of HPT and the delivery system of educational technology that work very well hand in hand if we take a look at it from a big picture standpoint to help advance education. So a couple of things. If we have human performance technology, we're able to analyze the problems. Let's get to the heart of what it is for these specific students or this group of students, whatever it may be, who is ever being analyzed, plus the solutions package that can be helped and tailored by some of the systems and technology, whether they're tools again or systems from educational technology, gives solutions for educators. Now that sounds great. Now, why haven't we gotten there? Well, we have discrepancies and we have deficiencies in the educational program. So if we're looking at ways to figure out how do we get from point A to point B, how do we improve test scores? How do we improve these measures? How do we get to these metrics? Those are good questions. That's a good starting point. But in order to get to that end result, we have to go through the process. We have to have a framework. We have to say, all right, well, we kind of sort of maybe know a problem and we're starting to ask questions about it, but how can we identify it specifically? Where can we get to the heart of it? And then once we know exactly what that problem is, how do we know if we're getting the right solution for it? So it's not just as easy as saying, well, okay, well, kids need more of this, and we're just going to practice this, and here it goes. Well, things might change along the way. So keeping in mind these principles, we're going to try to figure out how do we have a better solution overall for what's happening in education through HPT and educational technology. So the first thing we're going to take a look at in depth is human performance technology problem analysis. Let's take a look at how HPT can work for education. So we need to take a step back first. When we started to see first education, we started to see it in the realm of the industrial age. And when we saw that, we saw batched assembly lines, we saw compartmentalization, we see standardization. So go into some traditional classrooms today. What do you see? You see a bell schedule. You see a student go to first period, have their subject taught, let's say it's math, and then move to their second subject after a certain amount of time, 40 to 50 minutes, whatever it may be. Then go to their second bell, that's English. Third bell could be history. Fourth bell could be music, right? And so on throughout their day. They're compartmentalized for certain items, much like we saw on an assembly line where one worker does one thing and helps with one person. We're going to continue to see over and over and over again that movement down the assembly line as kids continue to get different pieces of information constructed to them. Now, with that compartmentalization, a lot of times there is a separation of the subjects. Social studies is separate from science, it's separate from math, is separate from whatever else, music, physical education. There's a number of different things that have not been interdisciplinary. They've just been in their own compartment. Along with that, we've also seen a massive standardization effort, where we have on the bell curve a certain number of students that fall within that average, but there's also a certain number of students that do really, really well. Those are the extreme performers on one end, and then people that don't do very well, and they're on the extreme opposite end. So what we've seen is the most important thing for our kids has been that idea that we send them through based on when they were born. So the industrial age sends them down an assembly line, they're batched, they have a date. That date is when they started, right? Whenever they might have started their school journey, and then whenever it ended is their graduation date. In the information age, we have an opportunity to be more fluid. Because of the online digital presence that we have the ability to be more interdisciplinary. We have the ability to combine these different things. We combine math and science. We can combine social studies and language arts. We can combine music and physical education. We can combine these different items so that each student, who's exactly unique, can have an ability to not just stay on that bell curve and be defined at one end or the other, somewhere in the middle for whatever subject we're taking a look at, but how do we bring them to mastery? Instead of just being so-so at whatever subject, how do we get them to a point where they have mastery? Or for those high performers, how can we push them even further? For those lower performers, how can we push them to where they need to go so that they have a foundation they can continue on from there? So what we're seeing in this transition into the 21st century is an opportunity to get away from the industrial age standardization process into an interdisciplinary, tailored, unique process. HPT, educational technology, can help play a big part into moving us forward with that. What we've seen previously is the teacher-centered environment, where the teacher has the knowledge, and then it's going to transfer that to the student. But that transference is only based on the teacher-led pacing. So the epistemological approach of a teacher-centered environment, right? What do you know? Let's test it. Let's do it. We're going to have a test Friday. We're going to lead up to this. That's been education for a really long time. However, there's a lot of things that go on. Students are at different paces. There's a lot of things that happen in students' lives, whether it's extracurricular, whether it's personal, whatever it might be. That Friday test and that performance for that high-stake test on that exact day might not be the best for the learner. The learner might not be able to show and express what they know. Now, that being said, there's a lot of students that have gone through that and have been very successful in doing so. But if we can bring that student, not just to be okay and to pass these different classes, but to bring them along so that they have a mastery of those different skills, we then get into the ontological approach, or the approach that doesn't necessarily have a linear model. Instead, we can be more focused on a learner-centered environment, where instead of the teacher acting as a knowledge transference unit, we now have the teacher acting as an instructor and as really a co-creator. And in that regard, we're starting to see an educational journey, not a prepackaged solution for what we have in the classroom. So the ontological approach, the learner-centered environment, is difficult, yes, because as many students as we have in schools, that will be the number of tailored packages that we'll have for those students. And that being said, that is a daunting task. But what we're going to find here is that if we have a collaborative community, we can start to take that approach instead of having it lay onto one person and have that individual overburden from that. If we spread it out through a community, it can be possible. Now, a big thing about HPT problem analysis is to get from that teacher-centered environment to that learner-centered environment, we're going to have to be driven by data. And a lot of that data is driven through HPT frameworks. Now, instructional design does play a factor into that, where we have the ADDIE model, for example, where we first see analysis at the very beginning with that A. The idea of using human performance technology and the idea of letting it be data-driven is so that we can push measurements forward. We can't just say, yeah, we're having kids learn more in this nonlinear fashion. Well, we don't really know if that's happening or not. To have that nonlinear fashion, we have to know, has a student gotten to the point that we deem necessary as educators to to have mastery in that item. To do that, we have to analyze first. So as we go through ADDIE, we go through analysis and development, or we go through analysis, design, development, switch to use there, and then we go through implementation and evaluation. The idea is that we continue the process of that student individually. Have they gotten to that point yet? And if students have gotten to that point, we can then advance them. But without knowing for certain through analysis of data, we don't know. We're pushing kids forward that we probably shouldn't be pushing kids forward just because we haven't done the analysis of data for that. Now, that being said, there's a lot of things that go into education beyond the data points. However, we can use data and drive with data as a way to start to understand from an apples to apples comparison, should students move forward? Have they mastered certain things or have they not? Now, HPT does offer frameworks, but they also offer points of view. The idea is, as we take a look at human performance technology, we drive a front-end analysis, such as what Harla said. The idea is we're going to take a look at the issue first. If a student is having problems in math, if a student is having problems in social studies, if a student is having problems in English language arts, then we can start to identify where are the actual discrepancies or deficiencies of that student. If a student is having trouble writing, let's say, for example, in an English class, then a prepackaged solution not really going to work out for that student if it already presupposes that that student has the writing skills necessary to be successful in that package. Instead, we take the idea of what's happening to that student, having a difficult time writing, whatever it might be, whether it's sentence structure, whether it's composing a well-written out paragraph, whether it's evidence support, let's say. Then we go ahead and have a solution for that issue. So students have trouble writing, let's meet them where they're at. Let's help them with their writing and then move that student forward before we go anywhere else. The idea is we want to be tailored for those students. If there is a student who is advanced in their writing, we can move them a little bit quicker because we've identified that that isn't a problem. That other student who might be more advanced in writing might have problems in other places. Maybe they have difficulty in their vocabulary, for example. So identifying the problem is key to figuring out where each student is. The idea is we want to make sure that there's a difference between discrepancies and deficiencies. Discrepancies versus deficiencies, as described by O'Driscoll in 2015, was the idea that we don't want to have and identify performance issues as only deficiencies, as something that's lacking in that person. A discrepancy could be that we're not seeing the results based on what students have been trained for or what they've experienced in the past. So big difference is deficiency, a student has not been able to perform that thing. A discrepancy is the training and the other skills that a student has built has not prepared them for that item. It's not to say that they can't do it, just that they might not have been prepared for that. A deficiency is a student has not shown that they could do that even though they've been properly trained, or they have some solution package before that, might have to rethink about what kind of solution could be added based on, again, HPT framework of what is the actual problem. Now, big part of this is that a lot of these issues are multiple disciplinary. So if we're talking about writing and expression, if we're talking about critical thinking, if we're talking about problem solving, these are going to be interdisciplinary, and different fields like educational technology or instructional technology or human performance technology or instructional design, these all are going under the same banner of trying to help students perform. This is where the interdisciplinary that Cho was talking about comes into effect. Now again, measurable data points, driving analysis and solutions, we have to figure out problems to help that student. If we're just saying, oh, well, overall our class is, not the best writers, we need to have a prepackaged solution. Well, there's going to be really good writers in there. And then we're not going to be serving those students. And some of the writers that we have are probably pretty good, but they might just not be gelling with whatever the prompt may be. So again, having a tailored package solution for those learners is going to be very, very important. All right, so HPT is going to get us to the problem. We're going to figure out what the problem is. We're going to go and have a tailored solution so that we can get closer to those students and make sure that they're mastering the skills that they actually need, as opposed to just assuming that they need some of these skills. Now, with the environment itself, there's a huge changeover between the industrial age education and the information age education. Big part of that is going to be the availability of things like information, media, and communication through the internet. And as we see this, we're going to find that as more and more people work, such as this call on Zoom, that the authentic learning environment and really through a digital learning environment is going to be key and paramount to students and how they learn. It's all good and fine to say that students can use paper and pencil, right? Can have a kinesthetic activity in front of them, can be able to manipulate different things, build different things. That's amazing. But what a lot of students are going to have is they're going to get immersed into a digital environment. And the better off that we can be as educators getting students into an authentic digital learning environment, the better off that we can be. If we're not doing that, we're not exploring the different possibilities of digital environment, whether we're looking at an instructional hierarchy like SAMR, or we're looking at different ways that we can start to reach students that aren't possible in the physical environment, but are more possible in the digital environment, we're not serving students to the possibilities that we as educators can get to. So there's a couple of things. If we want to update the paradigm from the teacher-centered environment, where teacher is doing the knowledge transference, to a learner-centered environment where we start to have more and more of these ideas where students are co-producing with the instructor as a facilitator, we have to be focused on skill-based ideas, and we have to be focused and okay with the idea that some of these are going to be interdisciplinary. We have to take the approach that students are going to be fluid in their learning, just like all of us in our adult lives are going to be fluid in our learning as well. We're going to have peaks and valleys of learning. We're going to have peaks and valleys of ideas of, should this work for me? Should this not? Oh, I'm burnt out on one thing. I need to refresh a little bit before I go into another mode. So if we think about the learning process as a non-linear process, then as opposed to just standardizing the pacing, we get students to where they're really learning and what they're really going towards. Now, a big part of HPT and some of the realizations have been about the transition from focus on behaviors to focusing on accomplishments. And a big part of this is about Gilbert's research in HPT as reported from Dean in 2017. So the idea is if you focus on behaviors, you only focus on what people are doing, right? Their actual operations that they're doing. If they're not doing their operation in the same way that you think they should be, then a lot of that management and those ideas and training falls to how should you do something, as opposed to what product are you making? A big part of this goes back to the ontological driving question. In that question, the idea of how do you know, as opposed to what do you know? That's a big difference, because if you show how do you know this, you can show it in a variety of different ways. Some of these pictures down below, you can have a digital environment to show off what you know. Some people are great oral communicators and can eloquently describe what it is in a production or a showcase. Some people can write really, really well, and they want to express what they know through their writing medium. Each one of these examples, whether it's digital, whether it's communication and face-to-face, whether it's a writing example, each one of these students and perceived learners would show how do you know something in a way that works best for them. This gives students not only voice, but also choice in terms of how can they showcase what they know. Some students are really good and musically inclined. Some students are great at writing. Some students can just go off of what they know, have this great presentation, and we'll call it a stage presence. They're great performers. Other students are extremely creative in what they can manipulate and use in the digital environment. All of those students have the possibility of showcasing how do they know something in a medium and a format that's comfortable to them. But if we only focused on the behaviors, we would only say you can only show something through writing. You can only show something through a presentation. You can only show something through the digital environment. And if that's what we're focused on, then we're missing what the output is, what the accomplishment is. And if the accomplishment that we're focusing on as educators is to show mastery, then we should be able in a learner-centered environment to showcase how people know something, not just what do you know through this operation of behavior. Human performance technology is about the accomplishments. What output are we getting? If we're not getting that output, how do we change it? So where we talked about in the last section about analysis, we're now getting to the, all right, how do we get there? What can we open up to allow things to go through? This is a big part of educational technology. What are the systems? What are the tools that we can use today to allow students to showcase what they know, not just what they know on a standardized test or in some medium that's been pigeonholed to them from the teacher-centered environment? So there's a couple of things. Correct analysis is going to drive that learning. Solutions packages without problems, they're not solutions at all. They're just pre-packaged tools or trainings that allows some bell curve or something to happen without true learning, because we haven't identified the problem, so we're not addressing that problem. That problem, discrepancy, deficiency might still be there. Analyzing real problems equal creating real solutions. you don't analyze it, you don't really know. This is especially important in the environment because that environment is going to continue to replicate itself. If you don't fix the problem, it's going to happen over and over and over again. It becomes a learned experience for those learners. How do you know driver equals the true mastery of assessment? So student voice and choice, allowing students to continue to grow in that was a big part of what Ray Galuth and his team said in 2016 through their work. But again, the idea here is that we want to drive based on analysis, based on problems, based on measurable data points that we can take a look at. Now, a big part of this is realizing that we're in the 21st century, and that 21st century learners have a great opportunity based on technology. So 21st century technologies require updated analysis and solutions for learners. What we had as great solutions for learners that were going through maybe in the 1990s or even the early part of the 2000s, it's completely changed now as we take a look at what's happening in 2020. What we see here in 2020 is an opportunity to get and involve learners that we've never seen before. Digital connections, manipulation of digital environments, digital creations and showcases that we can have, even having calls like this on Zoom, completely have changed. So we have to realize that with these solutions packages, being able to identify problems is an ongoing, it's not a battle, but it's an ongoing process. And that process is going to continue to update as things like educational technology and human performance technology continue to evaluate and continue to gain different knowledge and different bases for these different items. So 21st century learners should focus on skills and mastery. We're not focused on pace as much as we see in the teacher-centered environment. We're not centered as much on standardized testing, even though that's a big thing, especially to compare apples to apples. We see a lot of states having standardized testing as a way to give funding in other ways, but those skills and that mastery of items, that's important. All right, that and focusing on that is more important than the teacher pacing to give every student the opportunity to succeed in the classroom. We shouldn't just be going through and saying, well, we have so many F's, so many D's, C's, B's, and A's. We want those students to master those concepts. So push those kids from F's all the way up. Push those kids from D's and C's all the way up as best as we can. Give those kids a chance, even if it takes them a little bit longer. Let's make sure we get kids mastery in the subjects that they need. So the third point here is that we've seen analysis as a big driving point. Educational technology helps deliver that. We need to analyze problems to get the solutions. We need to move ourselves into a student-centered mindset and paradigm to allow each student to develop skills in an interdisciplinary way and to be able to continue to get mastery, not just that pace that happens in the teacher-centered environment. A big part of that and a big part leading to that is that we need practitioners and researchers working together. Now from Galgal and Borg, who are educational researchers, they had this quote in their book. If educators suddenly were to lose the body of knowledge that has been gained thus far from educational research, their work would be virtually unaffected. Now Galgal and Borg were making this comparison to other professions such as lawyers or doctors, psychologists, who were very dependent on what the research said for their actual practice. But here, educators, it would just keep working. That's a problem. How do we get some of those best practices into educational classrooms? And how do we get those educators what are seeing in the classroom to help out the practitioners? We need it to be a two-lane road. What we're going to see is that practitioners, as they continue through, much like human performance technology practitioners, are going to have to drive some of the important research questions. Without the practitioners telling the researchers, hey, these are things I'm seeing, we need to do more research in X, Y, and Z, then they're not going to know. They're not going to know what things need to be researched and continued to look at. On the other side, researchers who are looking at these different practices and best practices and what's happening in different trends need to help inform the practitioners of, hey, this is what's going on. This is what we're seeing. This is what's cutting edge in our field. So both have a mutual responsibility to one another to help move the field forward. Now, beyond that, we shouldn't think of these groups as exclusive. We should think about these groups as people that are interrelated, but also we should think about one single person having their foot in both realms. Now, there could be a practitioner that has a little bit of research that goes into it, or vice versa, somebody that's heavy into research, does some practice to gain some knowledge from that. But there should be a collaborative process across the board. It shouldn't just simply be reserved for one person or another, because what we've seen in education is it's been historically an individual type of field. We don't want that. We want education to be collaborative. So here's what Cho says. Human performance technology and other related fields share common goals of learning and performance in diverse contexts and are converging on the importance of people and improving organizational performance through learning, development, and innovations. There's many fields that are working on trying to help improve. So why aren't these fields all working together collaboratively? Why is it that education still continues to be a singular field? Why is it that human performance technology is not collaborating with other fields and researchers and practitioners to get these types of things done? Now, 3 factors and features I want to point out here in HPT to move practitioners and researchers closer to one another. HPT analysis starts with performance problems, not solutions. If practitioners are working through this and researchers have ideas about these frameworks and how to best apply them, both of them need to work together to get that item done. The second thing, HPT and analytical frameworks do not presume solutions. Okay, so what do they presume? What can they start to deliver? Practitioners can start to see how different solutions work, if they're actually viable or if they're only good on paper. Researchers, on the other hand, should be able to help research and identify what are some of these items that can start to go along with solutions if these types of problems are being seen. Now, again, that's not saying that we're pre-packaging solutions. That's just saying that we can start to head in a direction if we start to see these problems based on what has worked previously. And third and final, HPT measures success through the measurement of results. If practitioners and researchers are both looking at this saying, here are the results, here are some things that can be measured, here's what other people are measuring, here's what it means across the board, that gives practitioners a much better idea to say, look, if these kinds of scores are low, here's what we're seeing across the nation, here's where things can go and improve, but we might also have to improve these other scores to help improve this score. So as you go through it, we see a web, but it's mutually beneficial for both researchers and practitioners to go through and help each other out. And much in the same way that HPT professionals are going through these 3 items, this should also be the concentration of educators who are trying to help their students and learners. As you take a look at this, the idea is we need to advance because the 3 features of HPT can't be done in isolation to their best and optimum levels. Now, it's not just HPT, it's not just education, it's not just ed tech, it should be interdisciplinary. So HPT demands multidimensional and interdisciplinary approaches. This is true in the research that's done by Horde and Stefaniak from 2016, also the research from Kang in 2016, both supported this idea that the interdisciplinary and multidimensional parts of HPT are extremely beneficial to educational professionals, to practitioners of HPT, to those that are engaged in ed tech, all of these different ideas. So HPT and ed tech, leads themselves to this idea of interdisciplinary approach. Education can go interdisciplinary and community driven through a number of ways. Educators are usually in contact with one another, but we still have small networks. There's a growing movement of open education resources, open education itself, and open communities that has been growing, such as David Wiley has been researching for many, many years. Wiley and Hilton, and from 2016, talk about this idea of a renewable assignment, continuing to improve on mastery, not just some of these ideas of non-renewable assignments, these assignments that get read, such as essays, and thrown away and never touched on again, but to build the skills over and over, to continue to replicate these ideas, to get connected to subject matter experts, to get connected to other teachers and other students across the world, to have collaboration with other teachers, to get the best possible learning environment, lessons, and the ideas of analysis. Education should be cooperative. And as we take a look at these interdisciplinary approaches, we should continue to keep that in mind for HPT and EdTech. All right, so let's wrap up a couple things. A big notion here is that we're behind. We're still in the traditional teacher-centered environment, and the learning process in education is lagging behind. It's lagging specifically in authentic and realistic learning, especially through the digital learning environment. And because of that, we're seeing that we're not allowing other practitioners and educational professionals to have this collaborative approach in our schools. Traditional approaches are not as effective as some of these emerging practices. The research is there. Regluth et al., for example, from 2016, and Regluth's other research examples have had a lot of different studies about how beneficial the learner-centered environment can be. Now, there is a solution. The big solution is that HPT and EdTech provide solutions for education. This is in Kid and Song from 2010. We also see this in Zhang and Dahl in 2010 as well. But the idea here is that there are solutions, there are frameworks, there are points of view. There's things that can be had collaboratively, but a lot of times we don't see that interdisciplinary approach. We don't see that trust between these various fields. We don't see the production and the reaching out to these different items. Instead, what we see is education mostly operates on an island, whether it's in specifically the classroom or its school district itself. If we want to continue to advance the learner-centered paradigm, if we want to continue to advance these different things about having mastery and having the focus of advancing students and student learning, we need to be able to have an interdisciplinary approach. This burden should not fall on a single practitioner. Instead, it should be a collaborative effort between practitioners and researchers. It should be a collaborative effort between multiple fields. HPT and EdTech has that opportunity to lay that collaborative foundation and to continue to help transform education. All right, so this will be the point of the presentation. Give my thanks. I have my name, again, my email's up there. Again, for slides go, this attribution is located down below. Free Pick helped out with the different graphics. Again, those citations were down there below. The references are here in alphabetical order. Not exactly APA in terms of Times New Roman font 12, but they are listed here in an APA type format. This is the first page, and this goes along to the second page as you take a look through here. Some of these are referenced through the narration. Some of these are referenced specifically in some of those quotes that were here as well, but all of them dealing with the content and the information for this presentation. So wrap it up again. Thank you. My name is Alex Wanstrath. Hope you all enjoyed my presentation. Again, just about a time here. So this is for 732 Human Performance Technology at Liberty University.